Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is February 5th, 2026, and we are looking at a stack of new reports coming out of Japan. And honestly, the landscape is shifting much faster than I think most people realize.
It really is. Before we jump in, though, just the necessary disclaimer. This audio is our personal commentary based on public information and reporting.
Right.
And while we use AI for organizing our thoughts, the final interpretation, the editorial responsibility, all of that lies with Hiroyasu Ichikawa of Social Company, Inc.
Okay, so with that covered, the mission for today's deep dive is to really get a handle on what's happening on the ground. We're just 3 days out from the lower house election.
February 8th.
But reading through all this, it doesn't feel like your standard political horse race. It feels more like, I don't know, an energy crisis dressed up as an election.
That's the perfect way to put it. It is absolutely an energy election. I mean, think back to just after 2011.
Oh, yeah?
Nuclear power in Japan was, well, it was politically radioactive, pun intended. You just couldn't touch it. Now, you have the ruling LDP, the Innovation Party, the DPP. They're all actively campaigning on restarting reactors.
That is a huge U-turn. So what's driving it? Is it as simple as voters being fed up with high electricity bills?
That's the surface reason, for sure. But the real structural driver, the thing forcing the issue, is the tech sector. We're talking about an explosion in energy demand from AI data centers.
Right, they need that baseload power.
Exactly, power that's always on, 247, whether the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. And, that reality has basically forced the political sentiment to flip.
And I see TEPCO is trying to ride this wave with the Kashiwazaki plant. That's the biggest one in the world, isn't it?
It is, and they are desperate to get it running again. They need that revenue to cover the Fukushima compensation costs, but it hasn't exactly been a smooth restart.
What happened?
Well, they just had this incident with the 96 reactor. An alarm went off during a control rod check, and it halted the whole process.
So a safety failure.
They're calling it a setup error, so a procedural mistake. But it delayed the commercial launch, and it really highlights this friction point we're seeing.
Which is?
There's this political desire to restart nuclear, but the operational reality of turning these enormous complex machines back on after years, it's just incredibly difficult.
And speaking of political desire, Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi seems to be just defying political gravity. Her approval ratings in these reports are, 57, 82%?
She's running a very high-energy, some might say vibes-based campaign. The public loves it. The markets, though, they are sweating.
Why?
Investors are looking at her spending plans and getting really worried about fiscal discipline. Bond yields are hitting records because there's a genuine fear of a Liz Truss moment.
Okay, for anyone who's blocked out 2022 British politics, maybe a quick reminder on that one?
Sure. It's basically when the UK government announced huge tax cuts and spending plans with no clear way to pay for them.
And the markets just revolted.
They panicked, the currency crashed, and that's the fear. That if Takaichi spends too freely on all these energy projects, the yen could face a similar fate.
Which circles right back to energy, because Japan imports almost everything. And that brings us to JERA, the country's biggest utility. I saw they just signed a massive deal with Qatar.
A 27-year LNG agreement. This is really the other side of that security coin. On one hand, it guarantees you have gas supply. On the other, it creates what they call carbon lock-in.
Lock-in.
Well, think about the timeline. You sign a 27-year fossil fuel deal in 2026. That means you're committed to buying that gas until 2053.
Which is 3 years past Japan's own 2050 net zero target.
Exactly. It's a glaring contradiction. You're securing your energy for today by potentially wrecking your climate goals for tomorrow. It's the big trade-off.
So we're locking in gas, we're trying to restart nuclear. Is there any good news on the domestic resources front? Or is it all still about imports?
There is actually a pretty fascinating development happening at the bottom of the ocean. Researchers have successfully pulled up rare earth mud from 6,000 meters deep.
Near Minatorishima Island, I see. Why is mud important?
Because it's packed with dysprosium and neodymium, the key ingredients for high-performance EV motors.
And right now, Japan gets all that from China.
Mostly, yes. So if, and it's a big if, but if they can mine this commercially, it would be a huge step for resource independence.
But the timeline on that has to be huge. I mean, deep-sea mining isn't happening next year.
No, it's years, maybe decades away, and that's the theme here, isn't it? The green transformation is happening, but it's really uneven. You have Daihatsu launching great new commercial EVs, but then heavy industry, like green steel, is still struggling because renewable energy just isn't cheap enough yet to be competitive.
So Pulling this all together, looking at the election, the deals, the tech, what are the big questions we should be left with?
I think it comes down to three things to watch. First, the economy. Can the Takeichi administration really balance all this massive energy spending without triggering that market panic investors are so afraid of?
The Liz Truss moment.
That's the one. Then, strategically, in this rush for immediate security, locking in gas, rushing nuclear, is Japan sacrificing the agility it needs for a true renewable transition down the line?
And the final one.
I think it's the blind spot, the timeline gap. Everyone is focused on the energy demand from AI that's happening right now today. But the big domestic solutions, seabed mining, green steel, those are solutions for tomorrow. The real question is, can Japan survive the gap between the two?
That is the question to chew on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.